Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my thoughts on all the big news that came out of Star Wars Celebration. So in this video I'm going to be talking about the news that came out of, I suppose, the four main panels that they had. The Episode 9 panel, the Jedi Fallen Order panel, the game, the Mandalorian panel, and also the Star Wars Clone Wars panel. So the order I'll do this in is from what I consider to be, I suppose, a worst panel all the way up to best panel. So unfortunately we have to start with the Mandalorian here, if not just for the sole reason that it was the only one of these four panels where they didn't show the live stream audience the clips they were showing. And while they have leaked out, it is not an ideal way to watch the first trailer to this show. And I just feel it was a bit like, without those clips, why are you live streaming this panel? What is the point of this if the core information you are talking about isn't actually going to come out to the majority of the people watching your panel? I don't get why they didn't explain what they were doing or anything like that. They're just like, oh, you guys are not going to see this. We're going to show everyone else this, but not you. And I just think that's an immediate kind of no-no on what's effectively your big announcement for this new show. And I know everyone went in excited for this. This was probably the one thing people absolutely expected to see footage from. So when it was the one thing we didn't get footage from, it was really unfortunate. The leaks I've seen of the trailer I think it actually looks fairly good, even though the quality of the video wasn't very good. So when they eventually decide to officially release that trailer, I think it is going to be good, and I'm still excited for The Mandalorian. It's just that unfortunately this panel didn't really do any of that because they didn't show me the main content from their panel. We already knew who the actors were for the characters, and fine, we got names and stuff like that. I think they showed us like some behind the scenes like pictures and stuff like that, and it was cool that they're doing, you know, practical effects and stuff like that. But I think the only real notable thing for the panel was I suppose just the interaction of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, seeing kind of how well they get along, and just seeing, you know, Dave pretty heavily involved in something kind of a live action focus. It was nice to see that. But at the same time, it really highlighted something where I felt this way like all the way back to like the Korra years, where Korra was like a big thing at Comic-Cons and so on. I really struggle with watching actors / voice actors try to talk about the show. It just, so often than not, they are just utterly hindered by, they are so terrified to mention anything that's considered a spoiler and get in trouble that they basically don't say anything. And that felt like the entire thing here of like, this is a great thing for the people in the audience and so on, but it is not particularly interesting to watch when there's no information being revealed. None of the actors really know just how much they can or can't say, so they basically just let the directors speak for them. And it just is this really unfortunate thing where it basically just means you get the exact same response over and over again from every single one of these actors. And this is basically what happened like across the entire kind of all of these panels, especially the Mandalorian and the Episode 9 panel. So that was unfortunate. But yeah, so what I'd ultimately say about the Mandalorian panel is that my excitement level for this show is still at the level it was before this. I don't feel I really learned anything else by watching this panel because they didn't show me the main content. And that's a cool thing and negative in that, like, it's obviously a very hyped thing, but the fact that there's no information on it is unfortunate. I suppose the other announcement that they actually did before Celebration was they announced the streaming service, Disney Plus, and it's coming in November. And they basically said at least the first part of the Mandalorian show is going to be airing on it when it goes live. I assume that's going to be the exact same case for Clone Wars, that it'll probably all be in November or in or around then. So that's the other important thing with regards to release dates about all of this, that's kind of what's happening with it. So that's that. Then we move on to, I suppose, third out of the four panels probably ends up having to be the game panel, the Jedi Fallen Order panel, for the sole reason that it was about a game and you didn't show gameplay. I get it, this was the sort of world premiere of the game, but it's such a downer when you have to like preview your trailer and are like, okay, we're not doing this at the end like the episode 9 panel. Here's the trailer. Oh, it's not gameplay, but it's in-game engine or whatever, and it's just like, oh, we already know the story. Like that's the one thing that we knew going in, what the idea of this game is. So we didn't really need a story trailer as such. It's a nice trailer. It gets me excited to see the game, but you have to show gameplay for something like this. It's a game. Show at least some element of what the gameplay is, because it's got a good developer on it, the Titanfall developer, and it looks to be like, you know, given what they're saying, you know, no microtransactions, single player only, no multiplayer. It's been what I think a lot of Star Wars fans have been waiting for with a game, and here's this, you know, high-end, you know, AAA game, and you go relatively light on the information. Like, what's the new character's name? Cal? I like that idea for a story, Order 66. I like that we're getting more sort of prequel era type stuff. This is obviously more in between eras, but I'd still associate it as being more prequel because it's so close to Order 66. That's just, stories like that are what I want to be told, because like I suppose in the aftermath of what they did to most of the old expanded universe stuff, we don't really have too many like stories about Order 66. So this is a good thing to get. Like we more or less know how like Ahsoka survives Order 66, Kanan does. So getting another character here, I think that's a good way to tell the story and go into some details about that, given that you don't have novels covering every single detail of it. The only other thing would be that it seems like one of the other characters in the game is a former Jedi Knight, and this female character is going to be your sort of guide, and I suppose it gives a reason for a Padawan to actually be able to like develop his skills, even though the whole structure of the Jedi Order is gone. Here's a more experienced person who's left the Order before all of this happens, and it gives a way for the progression to actually happen. So, you know, the game I think looks good, but sort of like the Mandalorian, it's like you sort of need to show us the thing you're talking about rather than just, you know, talking around it a little bit. I did find like the just talking between the panel members to be a little bit more bearable for this panel, just because I suppose I'm more used to watching kind of video game developers talk about it and so on, and the host they had was I think a little bit better at it and so on. I suppose second place in terms of panels ends up being the episode 9 panel that sort of kicked off the show, and obviously this was, I think, ultimately in terms of the mainstream media, this is the kind of highlight of the show in a way, because they ultimately delivered on what they had to do, which was one, reveal the title, second, reveal a trailer. I think the main thing to say about this is that the panel itself I found very difficult to watch, because it really represented a lot about like just sort of panel stuff that I don't particularly like, in that they spent the whole first couple of minutes basically just talking around the fact that they can't say anything. They kept the trailer for right at the end, so again you had all of the actors who came out walking on eggshells, not really being able to say anything of note about their characters, what happens in the movie, or anything like that. So it was just kind of there for the people in the audience that they get to be that close to all the actors, and it was, you know, there's a certain, you know, fun factor to just seeing them all come out. But when there's no real content to be said there other than here's one screenshot of that character, here's their name, cheer, it's just it feels like it's just this kind of very indulgent thing of just like, let's make the audience cheer just like over and over and over again without actually giving anything, and then finally they deliver it right at the end. So the big thing to talk about here is episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. I hesitate every time I say that, because I'm just like, wait, is it The Rise of the Skywalker, or is it Rise of Skywalker, or is it Skywalkers? I think it's The Rise of Skywalker is the title. So they could be talking about a single person, something else, I'm not really sure. It's an odd title. It is absolutely not what I expected the title to be. Given I suppose ultimately just what episode 8 did. and the whole, you know, let the past die, kill it if you have to thing, and ultimately what most of the takeaway from that movie ends up being, sort of leave the past behind in a way, apart from, you know, the Jedi will live on bit right at the end. It just feels a bit weird that you'd go from there to just immediately like, oh, and it's the end of the Skywalker saga, these 9 movies, but we're calling it the Rise of the Skywalkers. Okay. It felt a little bit like Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Oh yeah, all the Jedi are gone again. It's like, really? So we'll see what they do here. As for the trailer itself, I think obviously a lot of it is just, here's a shot of the character, here's a shot of the character. So you just like, here's Finn, what he's going to look like in this movie. Here's Poe, what he's going to look like in this movie. You know, quick cuts like that. The main things obviously to focus on are like what happens right at the end, and then the one kind of main sequence that the trailer is, which is in the desert, Rey kind of ignites the lightsaber, runs away, does the crazy backflip onto the TIE Fighter, which I assume has Kylo Ren in it, and hinting at some form of a showdown. Cool sequence, obviously just completely out of context, but you know, looks to be a cool action scene. I suppose my immediate reaction was just kind of like, oh, she just repaired the same lightsaber. Okay, I guess that's fine. Like I think I would have preferred that she made a lightsaber that was more, you know, distinctly hers. I get the legacy of having that lightsaber sort of continue throughout basically all of the movies, in that it's Luke's lightsaber, but actually it ends up being, it's actually Anakin's lightsaber, and so on. And so it being the main lightsaber and it getting passed down. I think given that they destroyed in Episode 8, I would have preferred that it be like the lightsaber crystal from that lightsaber remains, but she builds her own like handle basically around it. That would have been where I would have landed. Just make it more distinctly hers, like I said. Make it stand out as, it's now Rey's lightsaber. It's got like the core of the same lightsaber, but it's not just that Anakin lightsaber, you know, continuing on forever. Again, it's just a minor detail. I ultimately don't, I'm not like frustrated or angry about it. It's just, I wish they would have done something a little bit different and have it stand out. The main thing though is, I suppose, Luke's narration and basically, you know, no one's ever truly gone, and then the cut to what appears to be one section of Death Star 2, I believe, and then the Palpatine laugh, or the Emperor laugh, Sidious, whatever name you want to call him. And they doubled down on this by, obviously, trailer ends, we cut back to the stage, and there's Ian McDiarmid there on stage. He says roll the trailer again, and it's just the hint that like he's back, more or less, is the idea. I think they more or less confirmed it in some of the stuff they said in interviews in the aftermath of this, that yeah, this wasn't just a tease, we're more or less saying Palpatine is going to be a part of this movie in some way. And to me, that is a very notable thing. I went into Celebration feeling like, okay, this has to be the big reveal about what this movie is basically with the trailer. I was just hoping that they managed to deliver something that can bring people back after what The Last Jedi did. And I think they accomplished that, because I was at the stage, like, just where I've got to with Episode 7 and 8, where I'm just kind of like, look, I'm sort of invested in Rey's character, I want to see where they go with Kylo Ren, but that's about all I care about. I really don't know or have any thoughts about how they're going to wrap up 9 movies with this one. I still feel that way to a degree, in that I feel that this is a movie that is kind of, it has to do it all on its own. I feel this movie has very little setup from the first 2 movies with regards to like accomplishing what it's trying to accomplish. In that, like, okay, 7 introduced all the characters, 8 did, I suppose 8 in terms of stuff that is now going to be relevant here, it's just kind of like, Luke's gone, he's one with the Force now. That's really all the main takeaway from that. You know, Snoke is dead and Kylo is now kind of in charge of the First Order. Is that the only real takeaway from Episode 8 in terms of getting us to whatever we're doing in Episode 9? That's I think where the frustration is, of just like not really knowing how or what just one movie is going to be able to do. And that's where my worries lie with this, is just that it doesn't just have to resolve its own trilogy and, you know, bring, I suppose, bring Rey and like Kylo, Finn, Poe, their stories to a sort of satisfying place, given that we're realistically maybe not going to continue on with them, except maybe in the books or something like that. But it also has to be this satisfying conclusion to all 9 movies. So to me, that is basically saying you are committing at this point to referencing stuff like The Chosen One, the whole Anakin thing, where like a vision of Anakin / Darth Vader has been like teased for both movies so far, and it's been, I think, teased again for this one. That I think has to be something that you kind of continue on with, and you have to deliver here, because it basically more or less feels confirmed almost at this point that like Rey is the sort of new chosen one. That's why she is so, you know, powerful, so significant. Kylo is the current, I suppose, like last Skywalker in a way. So how are they going to bring it full circle, and what is the significance to the whole Palpatine thing? Because, like, I suppose ultimately, like, are they going to have to explain, you know, Palpatine's involvement in Anakin being the chosen one and how exactly that came about? You know, like, I like that idea of like just returning to, I suppose, the remnants of the Death Star to find something, or, you know, Palpatine's like spirit or something like that is trapped there in some way. I think that's a good idea to bring him back, because obviously Episode 8 was more or less them saying, you're not really meant to care about Snoke or where the First Order came from, because Palpatine's kind of behind it all in the first place, so just go back to Palpatine. Which I suppose leaves things up in the air, in that, like, my idea for the plot of this movie was always that it was probably going to be, you know, obviously more or less Kylo versus Rey, and it'd just be the resolution of light and dark, or grey, well, whatever direction they're taking. This now seems more that I think we're leading towards some sort of a team-up. Now, they still have to do some sort of a thing with Kylo, whether they decide to attempt to redeem him in some way, or just commit to, we've made these mistakes and there's only so much he can do to come back from that. That's still up in the air. It probably puts who are Rey's parents back up in the air again, but I still sort of lean towards the Chosen One interpretation in a way, and that's the more significant thing about where she comes from, rather than directly who her mother and father are. So I definitely said the main thing about this is that this trailer at least has me sort of invested again in the sequel trilogy. I still maintain that ultimately a lot of this movie might not really be helped or hindered in 8. Like, I just feel like 7 and 8 are borderline made like, yeah, they're there, but it's really all about 9, rather than like, oh, this movie is really helped by the fact that this one came before it and this one came before it. It just kind of feels like those were the 2 movies that we sort of just had to get through to get to this one, and they don't stand out looking back on them as being like, there's hints here about what we're doing here, because again, it just feels so weird that like the planning on this, and that like 7 was such a safe movie. It was, you know, good, entertaining, but it didn't really accomplish all that much because it played it so safe with like a standard plot. 8 took some risks, but it was risks based around like a very minor plot that didn't really accomplish all that much again. So now it seems like we have everything to do in 9, and like I said, I think that means this movie is going to have to at least commit to doing a lot of stuff. Whether it nails all of that stuff is going to be the big thing. So yeah, I give the reaction to this, you know, some credit, the trailer, some credit for bringing me back when I was worried that I might have just kind of been like done with the sequel trilogy. Just like, okay, here's the part of Star Wars that isn't really like doing it for me at all. This at least gets me back that, oh, here are the bits that are it feels like are actually going to connect these 9 movies together. And it's not just this, you know, 3 movies where it felt like with the first 2, all they were really doing was just killing off all the characters that a lot of people wanted to see, while setting up characters that maybe people aren't as interested in. This definitely feels positive more in the other direction. I wonder how much of it is a direct course correction from The Last Jedi. I doubt there's too much of it just, oh, a lot of people didn't really like that, but I think there's probably a bit of it, so that's something to note. But then I suppose what ended up being the best panel, sort of by default, just because of the format and how they did things, was the Clone Wars panel. It was the one, I think, guaranteed thing where I think everyone just knew, regardless of really what they do at this panel here, it's going to be one of the more exciting parts of it, because Disney knew that the one piece of sort of good credit that they've got in the aftermath of The Last Jedi stuff has been when they announced the Clone Wars. That's probably been the only, just like objectively, everyone is excited for this positive thing that they've done for Star Wars, was the announcement that the Clone Wars is coming back. So all they really had to do here was just deliver a good trailer, you know, have Dave Filoni and maybe some of the actors, and they did that, but they also delivered probably the best panel as well, because so many of these actors are so much more, I suppose, natural in this sort of environment, compared to, say, like J.J. Abrams, like, in the panel. Like, I think it's just in general, because I've seen some of his, like, interviews with Lost and stuff like that, I just struggle to listen to J.J. Abrams talk, you know, full stop. It feels like he just cannot compose his thoughts at all. And then with what they did with the other actors, it was just like, do I need to sit here and wait for the trailer watching this and just like, whatever. This one actually just felt good because, you know, you had Dave out there, you had Warwick Davis kind of leading the panel, who, apart from some awkwardness right at the start before he brought anyone out, I think he did a really good job kind of throughout. And I think a lot of that just comes down to Dave knows exactly how to talk to fans. Like, he has the whole kind of, in a way, gimmick, I suppose, of idea of, like, he knows he can't say too much, but he can talk Star Wars, so he can sort of talk around the spoilers, while kind of giving you information without giving away the important information. I think that's one of the things that, like, really kind of highlights the idea of, like, hey, look, here's a Star Wars, a super hardcore, like, detail-oriented Star Wars fan who's in like one of the kind of big creative positions, and it comes across so well, like, in all of that. Like, seeing the actors just mention that, like, he's kind of like the encyclopedia guy, it's actually just a really cool thing to get that. And so anything Dave has to say about the show feels interesting and important, versus, say, you know, some of the Mandalorian actors, you know, trying to talk about their characters, and, like, I get they're hamstrung by spoilers and stuff like that, but you really don't have a lot to say about your character. Really, I think only, like, probably someone like, say, a Sam Witwer, who had when he got his chance to speak about Darth Maul, you know, you could tell that here's someone who really loves Star Wars, loves the character that he plays, and actively, like, thinks about his character and all the different kind of places he's been and gone. Whereas I don't think it's even something you can even say necessarily as much about some of the other actors, even on the Clone Wars. So it was just interesting that you had, like, Dave and Sam there, basically primarily as just, like, I could listen to them talk all day about Star Wars. And a lot of, I think, another reason why, like, they stand out is because, like, they go on podcasts as well. Like, the Rebel Force Radio is a Star Wars podcast I listen to, and, like, they've interviewed Dave tons of times over the course of primarily Clone Wars. Like, he just came on and he always was able to talk Star Wars. Same with Sam Witwer, who would be an occasional guest in that show. He'd come on, like, their reviews for some of the other movies and stuff like that, and you could tell just that he knew Star Wars. And so listening to him talk was good, and I think this panel worked out better because they didn't just have it be all talking. They separated it with clips. The concept art that they showed, I think, felt a little bit more, like, interesting with the way they formatted it, in that, like, the panel was very much kind of broken up by the couple of clips they had, and then the trailer at the end, in that they had stuff to deliver, and they delivered it exactly. They gave you kind of a clip about each of the arcs, referencing basically the three main actors that they had there. Then they brought out the other ones. It just, I think, worked on all counts. And I don't even have too much to say about like necessarily the stuff that they showed as such, because like I think we more or less knew the arcs that they were going to do. Based on what they talked about here, it looks like we're going to get the Bad Batch arc with the kind of experimental clones. Then we're going to go into some sort of a Ahsoka dealing with just, I suppose, Ahsoka's life after leaving the Jedi Order before she's sort of gained any sort of stability. So there's just like the immediate days of like, oh, I don't just go to the temple and train. I actually have to like do all this stuff myself. Like, it seems like that's going to be sort of like the second arc. And then I think we know the Siege of Mandalore is going to be like a lot of episodes. So I think that's most of it. I'm not sure if we know too much about if there's any other like single episode stuff, or it is just the 3 arcs that we were told about. But like the reaction, the reception, even what they were talking about just how emotional this was, I'm almost kind of like, I'm almost like surprised they didn't just announce that, oh yeah, we're also doing more. Like, we know we said we were only doing these ones, but like we'll do more as well. Probably difficult now with Dave working on The Mandalorian, but it just feels like if this comes out, and if it's a huge success like I expect it to be, like, I'd say, you know, The Mandalorian's going to bring people in, but I think a lot of people are going to be surprised at the amount of people that pick up the Disney subscription service just because of Clone Wars. Because I know a lot of people just picked up Netflix because of the Clone Wars Season 6 on there. So that's something to sort of look out for as well, just to see how well received it is. Because it just felt like watching that panel, like, this was like in a way the biggest thing. This was the most, you know, hyped reaction, the most emotional kind of audience that we had there in terms of the reception to everything. Yeah, I think I think what really highlighted that this kind of panel went above all of the other ones was Dave introducing the kind of unfinished clip of Anakin and Ahsoka sort of reunited, just I suppose prior to the Siege of Mandalore. And the fact that like he wanted to show this because he felt that this was a very significant just character moment, you know, showed this sort of understanding of the audience and what they care about, the main dynamic. And he was willing to show that before it's fully complete. I think that just kind of says everything about like why that panel really stood out compared to the rest. The trailer looks very, very good. I think one of the most hyped things that I got from the panel was when they talked about Ahsoka versus Darth Maul, which is one of the fights we're going to see in the Siege of Mandalore. They said that this is going to be a very long, kind of more protracted lightsaber battle, kind of unlike a lot of what we've seen in the Clone Wars. Like, we've had some longish lightsaber battles, but I got the impression that this is going to be a fairly substantial, pretty big lightsaber battle. And for the first time ever, it seems like they're bringing in Ray Park to do mocap for Darth Maul. So the animation on this fight is probably going to be incredible. I'm so excited for that. Because obviously I love lightsaber fights, and if they have Ray Park doing this, that's going to be really, really fantastic. So definitely that's one thing I'm super, super excited for. So yeah, that's most of the panel stuff. There was the publishing panel. As far as I'm aware, I didn't look into it too much, but I don't think they announced any like new like major novels. I think 1 or 2 authors like teased that they're working on a project. They kind of teased the Journey to Episode 9 stuff, but a lot of that's never too great. Like, unless they're really going to commit to telling some like Kylo or Rey, you know, backstory stuff, I don't know how interesting a lot of those books are going to be, because like the Journey to Episode 7 and 8 books, a lot of them weren't great. So the books I'm more interested in are like out, I think, tomorrow. I'm still waiting for my copy to arrive. Master and Apprentice, the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon book, as I said, out tomorrow. In like a month or 2, we've got the next Thrawn book, which is going to be really exciting. But beyond that, like I didn't see them announce the like their Phasma book, their Plagueis book, their next kind of, you know, big character book like that yet. And that's sort of what I'm waiting to see what's next. And I hope the publishing stuff doesn't just get taken up completely by the, you know, very minor Episode 9 books of like, here's this random alien and what planet he's from and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, overall, like, it was a pretty exciting thing. Like, I'm glad that they did stream most of the main panels, and apart from the weird thing with the Mandalorian not showing any of this stuff to the live stream audience, it went, I think, really, really well. I watched some of the other coverage where they were just kind of focusing in on specific parts of the show floor, and it seemed like there was a lot going on. So yeah, apart from just, I suppose the main takeaways were that, once again, I don't particularly enjoy voice actors and actors talking about stuff when they're so heavily hindered by spoiler stuff. The Clone Wars actors were like the only ones who really stood out beyond that. When they finally did deliver on trailers, a lot of the times I felt like it hit home actually really, really well. But the main thing, I think, is just that there's a lot of good stuff coming out. I'm looking forward to seeing more about The Mandalorian. I want to see gameplay for Fallen Order. I want to see more about what Episode 9 is going to do. And then, I suppose, the thing I'm already completely sold on, Clone Wars, I'm so excited for it to actually come out. So, you know, a lot of this stuff will be more towards the end of the year. I think, like, November is, like, basically when all of this stuff is... November, December seems like when all of this stuff is happening. So, that's all there really is to say here. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Star Wars Celebration. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, and if you have any questions about stuff I didn't cover here, definitely ask them below and I'll try and answer them. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.